Woodland 5th grade. Just a quick note off the top here. Yep, thank you, LO. Appreciate the quick note to me this morning. I did not make the social studies as an assignment, so I pulled it down, sent everybody out a copy. So my apologies. If you go back into social studies, if you were looking over your work first thing this morning, I just made that a post. So I pulled that down, and if you'll notice now, I just pushed out the correct one. Thank you, LO. Greatly appreciate that. So now everybody has a copy of it. So thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, today is Monday, April 20th. It's 4/2020, and I'm thrilled you're joining me here this morning. Great weekend. Did have a little bit of rain there, but definitely turned out to be a beautiful day yesterday. I hope you got outside and enjoyed it. On this day in history, in 2010, 10 years ago. Hard to believe this is taking place. In 2010, take a look at this today. This is a great one for you to check out. Horrific scene. In 2010, the Deepwater Horizon oil rig, yes, BP, Beyond Petroleum, yes, 50 miles off the Louisiana coast, the oil rig exploded, causing the largest offshore oil spill in American history. For 3 months, see, the rig, which is above water, wound up exploding, and underneath the surface, the pipe that goes all the way down into the surface of the ocean wound up breaking way down low. So they couldn't seal it off. For 3 months, oil spewed from the earth into the Gulf of Mexico. It's estimated that over 206 million gallons of oil spewed into the Gulf. So take a peek at that. Deepwater Horizon oil rig. In 1902, this goes for some of the students out there that studied Marie Curie. Both Marie and her husband Pierre, well, they isolated radium on this date back in 1902. In 1986, Michael Jordan fans, which I am not, big Knicks fan back in the day. In 1986, Michael, he scored 63 points against the Boston Celtics. He was only in the league, I think, a year, maybe that was even his first year against the Boston Celtics. They did wind up losing the Bulls to the Celtics, both that game and the playoff series. It was a double overtime game, but he scored 63, which at that time, even today, that's a lot. But I feel like people score in the 50s and high 40s, 50s, and even around 60 quite a bit. 63, incredible. In 1841, in a literature note, the first detective story ever published. Yeah, I'm a big murder mystery kind of guy, as you can tell by the stories we share at the beginning of the year. And you have Edgar Allan Poe in 1841. His piece, The Murders in Rue Morgue, were published on this date in history. And in 2008, you have Danica Patrick of GoDaddy fame and NASCAR fame and IndyCar fame, which is why it's so important here. She broke history, becoming the first woman to win an Indy car race. Birthdays today, got 3 of them that I could find of high significance. Actress Jessica Lange, 71. Luke Kuechly. Now, he is a very interesting, extraordinary linebacker, potentially one of the greatest linebackers to come out of college and into the NFL over the last 6-7 years. Probably even maybe 25 years, one of the best. And he, this year, retired at 29 years old. He's 29 today. The man retired after just a short 6-7 seasons in the NFL. So he made money and said, you know what, I want to do other things with it. Luther Vandross was born on this day, infamous singer, 1951, passed in 2005. In music history, just a couple more things here. Backstreet Boys, founded in 1993 on this day. Elvis Presley, yes, he began an 8-week run in 1957 with his number one U.S. singles. He was number one on the U.S. singles chart with All Shook Up. So maybe stream that a little bit for yourself. And in 1993, Aerosmith released their 11th album, Get a Grip, and that featured songs like Living on the Edge and Crazy, one of my favorites. And overnight, if you haven't had a chance, take a peek at the oil market. Wow. I mean, I do every once in a while try to tie in the stock market to my math lessons. But today, overnight, the price of oil per barrel collapsed overnight, down 38 to 40%. You'll realize that it is now $11 a barrel. Just a few years ago, it was $100, $110 a barrel. Now it is $11 a barrel. That is going to have a massive impact on gasoline in the months to come. Gas is already at a low from where I can remember it. I mean, when I first started driving, gas was about 89 to 95 cents a gallon back in 1994, 1995. I think we're headed in that direction again. All right, let's go. Let's go. We left off last week. We got through, I believe it was 9 chapters. So what we have is we have about one more chapter that's going to take us we have one more chapter that will be on land. And then I believe all future chapters will then have us on board the Titanic for the voyage. So we are ready to rock and roll. We are on chapter 10. It's entitled Southampton. The date, Wednesday, April 10th, 1912. Let's go. Oh, real quick. On a side note, I have very specific directions for you. I posted a video, and I think you'll enjoy today's video. So you'll recall that we watched the Drain Alcatraz. Phenomenal. I think everybody enjoyed that mightily in class. Well, Nat Geo also put out there Drain Titanic. So if you're interested, Disney Plus, it's on. So if you want to take your eyes off the screen, that's fine. But if you would like to, watch on Disney Plus, feel free to ask your parents. I don't think they'll mind you watching the Titanic on Disney Plus. Stay focused, take notes, handwritten. And then, of course, the assignment afterwards would be to import them into the document that I told you about. Please make sure you watch my video. It shows you exactly how to move the slide into your document. And if you don't have Disney Plus, that's fine. The video is available via YouTube. Here we go. Patty Burns was in pickpockets heaven. Love that. True, Belfast had been home to purses aplenty, but a fellow had to know what to look for here. Here on the Titanic's first-class promenade, the wealth was so abundant, it seemed like you ought to be able to hold out a bucket and have it fill itself with silver and gold. It was a struggle to keep his eyes in his head as elegant ladies stood waving at the rail, wrapped in thick, lustrous furs and bedecked with jewels that would not have been out of place in the Tower of London. If their menfolk glittered somewhat less, it was in suits and cloaks of such exquisite tailoring that even a Belfast street lad could not fail to notice the quality. Patty could only imagine the contents of the purses and money clips that bulged beneath all that fine cloth, far more than the measly £1 banknote that had cost poor Daniel his life. Of course, cruise ships today, so much different. You don't carry any cash. You have a little SeaPass card. You take that card everywhere you want, and you pay everything on that. And then at the end of the cruise, you get shocked when they slide you a bill underneath your door for $5,000, which you weren't expecting. Anyway, the thought triggered a wave of melancholy, and Patty patted his breast, where he still kept Daniel's sketch for Thomas Andrews. He had seen Mr. Andrews around the ship several times already. It was strange. For all the Titanic's grandeur, Andrews seemed to see only problems. Patty had overheard him lamenting the number of screws in the stateroom coat hooks, or the fact that the kitchen stores could accommodate only 40,000 eggs, and not the 43,000 the quartermaster had requested. Right now, the great man was on the bridge with Captain Smith and his officers, watching the tugboats guide the Titanic to open waters. Patty couldn't see him, but he imagined the designer's expression, careworn and exhausted from overwork, as if the entire world was singing his praises. Patty had considered showing Daniel's sketch to Mr. Andrews, but then Patty would be revealed as a stowaway. He'd be arrested, locked in the brig until he could be sent to prison in America or England. Of course, there were 3 square meals in prison, but he'd heard other things about it too. Terrible things, far worse than an empty belly. It was enough to convince Patty that he wanted no part of it. If he could learn Mr. Andrews' stateroom number, he could slip the page under the door. But what earthly good could that do? Patty had spent hours staring at the drawing. He could not make head or tails of it. Besides, Daniel Sullivan was more than a wrinkled leaf of paper. He was dead, and not even the great Thomas Andrews himself could change that awful fact. You there? You're not being paid to daydream. A white-jacketed steward thrust a tray of brimming crystal champagne glasses into Patty's hands. Don't you know who these people are? He hissed into Patty's face. They have to be served before they even think about what they want. Go offer a glass to Major Butt over there. He's military attaché to President Taft. And that's Colonel Roebling. His family built the Brooklyn Bridge, you know. The steward listed several other famous names, but none of them meant very much to Patty, who had never heard of Brooklyn or its bridge. He knew these were fancy people and very rich, and he also knew that he wasn't here to serve them champagne or even to walk among them. He'd better get himself out of sight before someone else realized it, too. His uniform made him look like he fit in, but as the voyage progressed, the crew would learn exactly who belonged and who didn't. He was pretty sure he'd spotted that underage steward called Alfie, the one he'd overheard in the uniform room. And if Patty was recognizing people, other crew members would too, possibly even Alfie himself. Patty circulated among the passengers at the rail and distributed his drinks in their sparkling glasses. He couldn't prevent himself from smiling. Being so close to so many fat pigeons ripe for plucking made his fingers itch. It was perhaps fortunate that his hands were busy balancing the tray, or he might have come away with enough money to buy legitimate passage aboard this floating palace. Oh, how Daniel would have laughed. A well-dressed swell, a little younger than the others, put a dove-gray-clad arm around Patty's shoulders. You'd best save the last one for Mr. Strauss, lad, he said, indicating an elderly man standing with his wife, gazing out over the bow at the tugs. Now, this is a real person. He's the owner of Macy's department stores in New York, you know. They say he's worth more than 50 million American dollars. Wow, imagine how much money that would be today. 50 million is a lot today. What would it be back then? Great question for you to look up. What was the value of $50 million back in 1914? In 19 teens, let's say. Patty sized the man up. He seemed no different from any of the other first-class passengers. Confident, exquisitely dressed, like he owned the world, which he probably did, or at least a good chunk of it. Amazing, Patty thought dizzily. A week ago, I was eating out of dustbins, and now I'm standing next to a $50 million man. Suddenly, a series of cracks as loud as gunshots cut through the air. The steel hawsers mooring a smaller ocean liner snapped like wooden toothpicks. Patty stared in amazement. It was the American liner New York, and it was floating directly into the Titanic's path. Are they daft? We'll smash them to bits. The young swell peered intently ahead. That ship isn't moving under her own power. Then whose power is it moving her? Patty asked in alarm. Are you saying she's sailing herself? The Titanic displaces 66,000 tons, the man replied grimly. The suction must have torn that ship clear out of her moorings. See? She's moving backward. The festive chatter on the promenade died abruptly as the stern of the New York drew closer to the Titanic's port bow, tossing like a dinghy in the overpowering wake of the oncoming liner. We're going to ram her, Patty breathed. Hundreds of passengers braced for impact. The $50 million man held onto his wife as they watched the drama unfolding below. The smaller vessel bounced high on a wave and veered around, swinging toward the hurtling black steel of the Titanic hull. Patty closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, it was all over. The New York had reeled past them, missing a catastrophic collision by perhaps a few feet. The swell let out a long breath and then raised his glass. The Captain E.J. Smith, The finest, most experienced skipper on the sea. Paddy nodded weakly. But in his mind, a discordant note had disturbed the regular thrum of the ship's engines. No amount of experience mattered on board the Titanic, which was so much bigger than everything else afloat that she could pull full-size steamers clean out of their secure berths merely by lumbering past. Only Titanic experience mattered. And since this was the maiden voyage, no captain had that. Does anybody really know how to sail this boat? Patty wondered. Give you a moment just to kind of reflect on that chapter. You think about it, it's the largest ship in the world, and as it moves past these other ships, it displaces, meaning the amount of water while it's in the water, 66,000 tons of water. So if you think about that, the hull comes down and it pushes water out. Now, as that moves past, it literally creates a suction. So anything that is maybe not anchored, they call it moored, meaning tied down, starts to get pulled by the Titanic. Pretty wild. Very wild, actually. Take a look and see what you got here. Thanks, KH. I would rather watch that as well, but I appreciate the humor there. All right. Here we go. Chapter 11. Aboard the RMS Titanic. From here on forth, we'll give the date because it looks like we're going to be on board the rest of the time. So this is Wednesday, April 10th at 8:45 p.m. Papa, if we don't go now, we shall miss dinner. The Earl of Glamford dismissed his daughter with a fluttering of two fingers that were not cradling his poker hand. Juliana flinched as her father signed another chit and tossed it to the center of the table. When Papa was embroiled in a card game, the rest of the world simply did not exist. Another hand, more money in the pot. Juliana was not privy to the Glam's financial worries, but she would have to be deaf and dumb not to know they existed. It did not take a chartered accountant to see that her father's fondness for gaming and his lack of skill at it was a large part of the problem. She looked around at the sumptuous dark paneling of the first-class lounge. The luxurious attention to the finest detail, to the tiniest detail, was impressive, even to someone reared in a family whose nobility stretched back centuries. Once again, reading this with permission from Scholastic. Yet all Juliana saw were the card games, poker, and bridge, grim-faced players, handwritten markers changing hands in lieu of banknotes. How can I get Papa out of here? She wondered. She leaned close to her father's ear. Please, it's not proper for me to go to dinner unaccompanied. Quite right. Without glancing up, the Earl snapped his fingers, and a hovering steward came running. Yes, sir, may I help you? Kindly accompany Miss Glam to the dining saloon, and see she is seated. I shall join her shortly. Face burning with humiliation, Juliana left the lounge on the arm of the steward, who was not 1 hour older than she. Even worse, the young man was very much aware of her discomfort. Don't feel bad, miss. When the gentlemen get into the gaming, it's nigh impossible to regain their attention. They wouldn't notice if the ship was sinking. Juliana was in no mood to be soothed. This ship is unsinkable, she snapped. Well then, they've got nothing to worry about. He returned softly. She stared at him in surprise. You have a lot to say for yourself. It was the boy's turn to flush. Most dreadfully sorry, miss. I didn't mean to be rude. And so you weren't, she assured him, ashamed of her ill-tempered behavior. You're trying to be kind, and I appreciate it. He was nice, but, of course, he was paid to be. Juliana had grown up with servants her whole life. She was fond of some of them and respected most of them. But their function was no different from any of the other useful item, like a broom or a motor car. They descended the magnificent grand staircase, brilliantly lit and dazzling. Other passengers, in evening clothes and white gowns, their jewels aglow, passed them on the broad steps, chattering, smiling, relaxed. At Cherbourg, France, more passengers had embarked, meaning gotten on board. You embark and disembark. That's get on the ship and get off the ship. At Cherbourg, France, more passengers had embarked, most of them wealthy Americans returning from the European social season. I'm happy to escort you to your table, miss, the steward told her. If there might be anything you need, just ask for Alfie. Ah, characters meeting now. Just ask for Alfie, and they'll come and get me. He swept her into the glittering dining saloon. Juliana had heard that this was the largest single room on any ship ever. She could see now that the description was absolutely true. Drenched with thousands of electric lights and centerpiece candles, fragrant with flowers and alive with music, the vast space took her breath away. There were so many tables, so many elegant diners, the world's elite. Really? How was it possible that Alfie was escorting her to this table? Seated there was that girl she had watched board the ship. The one who, along with her mother, had been brought to the Titanic by the police. Perhaps this is the wrong table, she asked pointedly. The problem passed miles above Alfie's understanding. He saw just two young ladies in charming evening gowns. The fact that one was the daughter of an earl and the other was being deported from the country was beyond him. What could a glam possibly have to say to such a person? Alfie seated her and withdrew. A waiter appeared and draped a snowy linen napkin across her lap. We now have all of these characters, right? We've got the girl of the woman who was protesting. We've got Alfie. We've now got this glam girl. We've got a lot of these characters now that were part of individual chapters now kind of all coming together here. Alfie seated her and withdrew. A waiter appeared and draped a snowy white linen napkin across her lap. You're alone too? Sophie observed. Juliana inclined her head. For the moment, my father, the Earl, will be joining me shortly. My mother, too. She's in the smoking lounge, puffing a giant cigar. Sophie noted the girl's shocking disapproval. Well, probably not the cigar, but you can get your last penny. She's having a political argument with some men who are growing angrier by the minute. That's the effect mother has on people. Is that why those constables? Juliana blurted. She bit her lip and said no more. Sophie looked sheepish. I was hoping nobody noticed that. Your English police aren't sympathetic to votes for women. That's mother's passion. It means more to her than anything, certainly more than her daughter. In spite of herself, Juliana experienced a twinge of sympathy. At this moment, she was lower on Papa's list of priorities than a deck of cards. She glanced at the gilded clock. Where was he? He'd promised to follow her in short order. Part of her suspected that he had no intention of coming at all. For Rodney, Earl of Glamford, a poker game was an all-night affair. Well, at least you're on your way home now, Juliana offered kindly. I'm sure your cause is more popular in America. Sophie sighed. It's not. The only difference is when mother is arrested in America, father is on hand to post her bond. She regarded Juliana curiously. Is this a pleasure trip for you? I am accompanying my father. He has business in America. Oh, what cities will you be visiting? Sophie asked. It dawned on Juliana that she had no idea where they'd be going or what the nature of her father's business might be. She knew that they were to be met in New York by a Mr. Hardcastle who owned oil wells. But Papa wasn't in the oil business, was he? Surely not. Papa wasn't in any business. A splendid gentleman who seemed to have gained 40 pounds since being measured for his tuxedo arrived at their table. Bless my soul, he roared through reddish mutton chop whiskers, seating himself across from the girls. That I should be so fortunate as to be placed with such abundance of delightful female company, each one more lovely and charming than the other. I shall become distracted trying to decide which one of you will be the first to honor me with the pleasure of a dance. The image of being steered around the dance floor, backing away from the ample belly, nearly caused Juliana to laugh in the gentleman's face. She looked over at Sophie. and saw that the American girl was having the same struggle. Perhaps the daughter of an earl and an American deportee had something in common after all. Let's see how long this next chapter is. I want to try and get, yes, we can do it. We can do it. One more chapter. It's chapter 12. This is now Thursday, so dinner passes. Obviously, all the characters move on, sleep. And now we have RMS Titanic, so they're on board. This is Thursday, April 11th. This is chapter 12, 8:25 a.m. The heat was unimaginable. Every time Alfie climbed down the ladder to the orlop deck, he was surprised anew by his memory of it was not half the reality. 29 boilers, 15 feet high, a total of 162 fireboxes, blazes raging. That was what it took to propel the Titanic, the largest moving object ever built by a man. Added to the temperature was the ear-splitting sound of machinery as the steam drove the engines that turned the enormous triple screw that propelled the ship. It was a crowded place, too. Alfie had a difficult time locating his father in the roaring hive of activity, the fiery realm of the Titanic's black gang. That's in quotes. It took more than 150 stokers to keep the boilers going, and they all looked alike, shirtless and black from head to toe, with coal dust and ash. Dad had been working at this on one ship for another for more than 20 years. No wonder his voice sounded like gravel. He must have a pound of sludge in his lungs. Another stoker put a grimy hand on Alfie's shoulder and pointed to one of the double-ended furnaces. "Your pa's over there," he rasped. John Huggins smiled and beckoned. Even here, the closest thing to an inferno Alfie could imagine, his father was always glad to see him. Whatever ill luck that had already happened and might yet befall him, there was that to hang on to. Being loved was no small matter. "Aren't you on shift, boy?" Alfie's father asked. "Mrs. Willingham has a shawl that she's especially fond of," Alfie explained, "and I've been sent to the baggage hold to dig it out of her trunk." John Huggins spat into the roaring firebox. "Especially fond of," he repeated in disgust. "I'm sure she's got 17 more in her stateroom. It's a blessing to be working class. Money makes you soft in the head." Alfie laughed. "Then I must have the hardest head of anybody. They're paying me £3.10 for the entire voyage." His father jammed his shovel into the bin and came away with a scoopful of smoldering, smoking coal. Alfie was alarmed. "Your bin is on fire." "Easy, lad," his father soothed. "This happens when you're working with coal. You're supposed to keep it well watered. But some of the younger blokes just wet the top of the pile and don't worry what's down below." "But fire at sea?" Alfie persisted. "That's not fire, lad." He indicated the relentless flames inside the furnace. "That's fine. Now you'd best be off. Can't keep a rich lady waiting for her favorite wrap." Alfie left his father and continued on his errand, passing through number 6 boiler room. As he ducked through the hatch, he imagined the heavy watertight door that would clatter down at the flip of a switch by Captain Smith. Down here, it was easy to visualize the 16 sealed compartments that made the ship unsinkable. A delicious coolness washed over him as he entered the fireman's passage forward of number 6. A thermometer on the bulkhead read 88 degrees. But the improvement was measureless. It took his strength to open the heavy iron hatch to his left. Trunks, boxes, and luggage were piled nearly to the ceiling, secured in place by thick netting, the worldly goods of more than 600 first and second-class passengers. It would surely take half the night to find Mrs. Willingham's belongings, and by then, some other fancy pants would no doubt send him on his next mission. After a watch fob or a makeup mirror this time, he yanked open the hatch to his right, hoping against hope to see Mrs. Willingham's trunk standing alone and unsecured, awaiting his key. No such luck. There was instead a vast cargo hold, crates of all sizes containing everything from tea to machine parts. They were all stacked one on top of the other, tightly tied down. As if a wave exits large enough to toss a ship this size, thought Alfie. The Titanic rode the Atlantic so sturdily that a pencil could be stood upright on a tabletop. He had seen it actually several times. It was his favorite game in the first-class lounge. He surveyed the hold, his gaze passing over bales of rubber, rolls of linoleum, sacks of potatoes, and barrels of mercury, and scarlet resin called dragon's blood. In the center of the compartment was parked a motor car. A car. What? It was large and bright red, yet it was almost completely hidden by the endless cases and parcels and casks. And then something inside, the automobile, moved. And we stopped there with a cliffhanger. We are about halfway through. Halfway there, living on a prayer. I hope this is enjoying your mornings. We'll continue reading it. Okay, we're about 5 days, I guess I've read it. What I'll do once again is I'll definitely read Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Friday, if we're about 20 pages or so close to being done, I'll do an afternoon read once again, like I did for the previous book, and get it done by Friday. And then we'll move on then to the next book, okay, which is arriving not in Kindle form, but in hardcover form on Wednesday for me. I put an order in for it for you guys. Okay, enjoy the day. I'm on email if anybody has me. I did a few screencastifies. Please make sure you watch for me. And I believe if everything goes well, Thursday will be the day that we might be able to have a Google Meet. So I know the district has slow rolled it, but there's been a lot of privacy concerns out there. Some districts jumped right to Zoom right out of the gate. And you've heard about people Zoom bombing parties and stuff. So the district has done a nice job in rolling it out. I know a lot of districts have done a lot of different things and immediately pulled up Google Meets and Zooms. But, I think that Warren has done the right thing and make sure erring on your privacy and safety for all of us. So I hope all is well. I'm going to continue to push out math lessons to you guys. We'll do this for reading. I'm trying my best, everyone. Please enjoy your day. I'm working my little abode here. Trying my best for you. We'll talk soon. Cheers, guys.